First of all, I wish to extend my gratitude to the Pizzuti collection, to Columbus, to Rebecca and your fantastic team for making this happen. You know, I was lucky and very honored to be added to this collection, and I was very happy to receive a catalog in Dakar, which is proudly sitting on my coffee table in Dakar. But I think it's only when I arrived yesterday and that I had the first walk into this phenomenal collection that I realized how exceptional this is. This is an adventure. This is a human adventure. This is such a welcoming space. I felt safe from the first minute I walked in, and that's why I'm starting this presentation with not too much stress, because I feel safe. I feel like I'm meeting a group of friends, and so I need to thank you guys also for being kind enough to join us today for this presentation. I always like to start my talks with a hashtag, throwback. I know it's not a Thursday, but I think I need to tell you how this all started. It started in 1980 on September 24th. I'm kid number 6 of a family of 6. Thankfully, I don't have any little brother or little sister. It would have been dramatic, at least for me. And yeah, I think I was 1 month old. This is mom and dad. Very hardworking parents. They were and they still are my heroes. My dad is an accountant, and my mom is trained as a lawyer, and they both worked in the corporate world for both national and private sector companies. So I wouldn't say that we were a privileged family, but they made sure that we never lacked anything. I was meant to be what my brothers are and what my sisters are, a professional in a multinational with a good job and a very stable life. Somehow I decided that it was not what I wanted, but still I gained a lot of support from my siblings and my parents and my 11 nephews. So I always start, it's a bit like a prayer, I always start by telling how thankful I am and how fortunate I am to be part of this family. Anyway, this is my grandfather, Omar Victor Diop, #1. This portrait was by Mama Kassé. I don't know if you're familiar with African studio portraiture, but Mama Kassé is to Senegal what Malik Sidibé is to Mali, or Cartier-Bresson is to France. And my grandfather was sort of a trendsetter, a very fashionable yet very respected gentleman in Dakar, in the Dakar of the 1940s. My dad always proudly says that people would actually sit in front of my granddad's house to see how he would walk out and what he would be wearing, because that would be the next trend. And so I grew up in 1980, and our living room really was sort of a crossroads where so many influences met and collapsed. My dad would read Cheikh Anta Diop to me. Cheikh Anta Diop is one of the prominent figures of the Senegalese and Sub-Saharan Africa identity. He's an anthropologist, a historian, a political figure, a scientist who has worked a lot on the early period of the Egyptian civilization and what Black Africans have brought to Egypt, and what Egypt has brought to Sub-Saharan Africa in terms of culture and civilization. Leopold Sédar Senghor was our first president from 1960 to 1981. So I didn't know him as a president, but he's still very present in our in our culture, imagine this, he was born in Dakar. He is the first black African member of the French Academy. He fought the Second World War, and he's like the founder of the Senegalese identity, the Senegal as a country, as a republic. He was Christian, yet he made sure that our country would be a, what's the word for laïc, like non-religious.
Secular.
Yeah.
Secular. Yeah.
For the record, Senegal is 96% Muslim. Our first president, and probably the one we cherished the most, was Christian. Just to tell you how open our Islam is, how we managed to stay together as a people. I went to a Catholic school from, well, I first went to a Protestant kindergarten, and then I went to a boys' school for 10 years, Catholic boys' school, and then I went to another Catholic school until the high school degree. But still, my parents are very Muslim, but very moderate. My dad say we're left-wing Muslims. I mean, the Senegalese lifestyle is a blend of all this, really. This is a very famous portrait of a woman from Dakar in the 1950s, and when you look at the outfit and the style, it really is a blend of African elegance and Arabic influences, and these gold medals she has on her forehead are actually French medallions, and her jewels come from Saudi Arabia, and we've always been like this. We've always been able to absorb all sorts of influences. So that's what I grew up in. I mean, watching TV with my brothers and sisters, we would jump from Bollywood movies to Eddie Murphy, Michael Jackson, and we would dance on Sunday to Celia Cruz. I loved Grace Jones. I read Diop. I read Victor Hugo, but I also read Maurice Condé, who is one of the most incredible novelists from France and the West Indies. I have a very good friend of the family here who just arrived and who saw me as a baby. And I remember this book would actually fly over the wall from our house to hers, up to theirs every summer, right? So this is what I grew up in, and I feel very fortunate to have been exposed to so many influences. You know, I think I had the same childhood as a kid in Paris or New York, but on top of it, I had the best of Africa. And I think I kept all this and also made sure that my parents would be happy and proud to have the last kid being a good student at school. So I went to the best schools, and I was a very good student. So I'm going to fast forward it, and I have my high school degree, and then I went to a business school in Dakar, studying finance like all the boys at home. And I'm selected to be. I was actually the only Senegalese student in one of France's and Europe's top business schools, École Supérieure de Commerce de Paris. And so I graduate and decide to fly back to Dakar. I mean, the day after the graduation ceremony, because I was homesick, I really was. And I get a job. I start with a consulting firm, Ernst & Young, and then I'm hired by another multinational that gives me a job in Kenya. And for the record, it's funny, when I landed for the first time in Paris, I was 25, but it felt like I had always been to Paris because of all the cultural exposure we had through TV and the photos of Jean-Paul Goude and Paris Match and all the, the French TV that we would get, the French TV shows that we would get in Dakar. But then when I landed in Kenya, I was blown away. And it's Africa, but it was a completely different world. This was the first time I was in an Anglophone country. And we might be on the same continent, but that's when I realized how diverse Africa was, and that Africa was not only Senegal, and that I had to learn a lot about the continent. So I start, thanks to my job, I'm covering, the day I left my job, I was covering 26 countries in West Africa. I was traveling every week to Abidjan, Douala, Lagos, well, you name it. And really, I'm very happy I went through all this, because that's when I realized that Africa is the continent of diversity. There are as many Africans as the 1 billion Africans. And it's probably going to take a lifetime for me to demonstrate this and to discover it, because I'm still learning about Africa. So I have a good job. It's working well. I'm well paid. Mom is happy. Brothers and sisters are proud. But something is missing. You know, when I wake up in the morning, first of all, I'm not a morning person. I should have known that I would be an artist. But something is missing. I'm in charge of corporate affairs, which means investor relations, government relations, tax issues, corporate communications. So I communicate a lot. I write many annual reports and company positions, you know, bullet points and PowerPoints and everything. But something is missing, because there's no purpose. There's no other purpose but making good money. And maybe affording good holidays once a year. But I don't choose the topic, I don't choose the words. I'm not free, and I don't have the feeling I'm bringing anything to the table. By the table, I mean to the human table. What am I doing as a human being but working and getting paid? I had bought a camera. I used to shoot landscape photography, and every Sunday I would pull up a white curtain and invite a friend of mine who used to be a model, and we would just shoot the craziest images for us. Then I would start sharing them in the social media or with friends. I was always kind of surrounded by people from the art world, because it was for me a way to live this dream. I was convinced that it was too late for me to even pretend that I was planning to be an artist. So being surrounded by artists and curators and art professionals was a way for me to live this dream, until one day a friend of mine looks at my first project, and he's like, "You need to submit this to the Biennial of Bamako." And I thought it was a joke, but hey, you know, it's the type of sentences you listen to, you hear, and you keep them at the back of your mind, and finally you're like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm pretty sure I will get no feedback, but what if? So I submit this portfolio, I forget about it, and one day I receive an email telling me that I'm among the 26 photographers out of 500 who are selected. I thought it was a prank. So here I am in Bamako presenting my first series, which is called Le Futur du Beau, which means the future of beauty. I'm 31, and this is actually the first time when I landed in Bamako. This was the first time I even saw a print of my work, because I had never even thought about printing my own work. I'm sort of accepted in this artistic community. And this project is, because we were given a theme, they wanted us African photographers to think about the question of sustainability and the question of recycling. And most of the photographers went they had a very, how do I say, scholar approach. Does that make sense?
Academic.
Academic approach. And I felt like, we get sort of accommodated to this speech about the environment. We get used to being pointed at like, you do this wrong. It's because of you that this planet is. It is because of you, because of your consumption, that global warming and all these catastrophes are taking place. And it doesn't. It's not my personality. I'm a very optimistic guy, and I like to have fun, and I think that you can talk about everything with a bit of fantasy and a lot of dreams. And I felt like I could borrow the language of fashion photography and come up with something that would be more accessible and that would be more inviting rather than accusing. So this was a series. I basically went around the city and also reused most of the materials, most of my waste from the house and that of my parents to create pages that would look like an African Vogue in 100 years. I invite my friends and I'm shooting every Sunday because I still had my job. Paper bags, anything that is from my own consumption or my friends' consumptions. And bottles of water, how do you call this, the sponges?
The plastic sponges,
Yeah,
kitchen sponges.
plastic sponges. This, for those who grew up in Dakar and West Africa, these are bags. This is made from bags that when you see someone travel with a bag like this, he's from West Africa, or at least Africa. They have so many names, African Louis Vuitton, or... And I borrowed my mom's sewing machine, which was one of her wedding gifts. And I start stitching this dress, and I make it an outfit. And really, all sorts of cartons and plastic bags. And this was really the beginning. And that's when I realized that I actually had a lot to say. And that photography was a way for me to have my own language. And it felt good to have at least one area where I was totally free to talk about my aspirations as an artist, as a young African. And so this was the first project. And I ended up on international magazines. I'm invited to all sorts of shows. I'm showing in the Biennial of Dakar, in Les Rencontres d'Art, which is the French biggest photo festival in 2012. And it's getting hard to manage both. I mean, in June, I'm already out of leave days. So, sometimes I'm calling sick to be able to go and shoot something or to be at my own exhibition. And at some point, I realized that I need to give it 100%. Everybody thought I was crazy. Well, I thought I was crazy too. Many sleepless nights, like what did I just do? But I quit my job. And I remember what I told myself the day I was resigning. I said, if after 1 year I have to go to my mom's to have a proper meal, then it will be time to look for a new job. Thankfully, it never happened. So this was a series, and it's a series of 18 images. And I'm starting to get more and more opportunities to work on new things. But still, I feel that something is missing because this was fantasy, but this wasn't really my reality, and I feel like I need to start correcting the perceptions that people have of us, young urban Africans. Because, you know, I mentioned Michael Jackson, I mentioned Eddie Murphy, and all this American culture, especially American black culture that we grew up in. And I remember sometimes, despite the fact that we loved it, you know, every time an auntie or a cousin would fly to the States, we would be desperately waiting for the videotapes recorded on MTV because that was the dream. But still, we felt like we weren't acknowledged, we weren't, people didn't know us, and that we were sort of overlooked. I remember this particular Michael Jackson music video. It was black or white, very beautiful video directed by Steven Spielberg, I think. It starts with him dancing in Moscow, very glamorous depiction of Moscow in the snow. He's dancing with those very good-looking Russian guards. And then he jumps to India, and there's this beautiful, gracious Indian dancer. And then he jumps to Africa, and you see Africans muscled with, I mean, grimmed with things that, I mean, scars and things you've never seen in Africa, at least not in Dakar, hunting lions with sticks. And you're like, okay, so this is Africa? And then what about us? So I had kept this in the back of my mind, and I felt like I needed to show everybody, including my generation of Africans, how important the days we're living in right now are for art, for self-representation, for our identity. And I'm also very much aware that in Senegal and in West Africa, we have a self-portraiture heritage that is extremely important. You know, when you visit a Senegalese family, until now, after a glass of water, the next thing you're given is the family album, because it's a way for the family to tell you who we are and who we were. And so how do I blend this heritage with modernity? How do I tell the story of people around me and my own story through portraits? I come up with the idea of creating a studio that I named the Studio of Vanities. And I name it the Studio of Vanities because it's a playful way to say that this studio is where I am proud to receive those I admire the most who are making it happen in the cultural scene in Senegal, Abidjan, Lagos, Accra, Nairobi. And these are nice vanities. These are not big egos. Egos are not attractive. This is all about taking a picture, having a look that you will want to look at in 50 years. And it's a testimony. It's also an interaction, a mutual discovery between myself and the sitter, and discovery of our African urban reality. I'm not saying that rural, traditional Africa doesn't exist, but I think there's a serious need to balance the perceptions of what it is to be 20 years old or 25 years old in the urban part of Africa, because nobody ever talks about it, not even us urban artists. So I invite people I know, people I discover, people I've read about, people who have initiated interesting things, people who, in a modern language, people who represent. For instance, this is Tierno. Tierno is a Senegalese model who was born in Dakar but who lives in Los Angeles. He's actually doing very fine. He's a model for, he's been a model for Nike, Reebok. He's been featured in many TV shows and movies, and he has, to me, he represents this new generation of African diaspora who doesn't lose the link and the connection with home, and who feel the need to come back and do things from time to time. You know, when you're a student or a young professional from Africa nowadays and that you happen to live in New York or Paris, every summer or every Christmas, you feel the need to go back home for a week. So it's not exile anymore. It's just representation of where you're from, somewhere else. So as you were saying, it's not about geography anymore. It's about the generation. And I feel as close to someone like Hank Willis Thomas or Kehinde as I feel close to someone like Tierno. And Aminata, for instance, is also a model, an actress. She is an engineer in computer science, and she's a member of the national handball team, and she's just 26 years old. See, this is what I want people to think about when they hear Africa. Well, at least if they could, among all the zebras and all the giraffes, also think about people like us, that would help a lot. And this portrait is also very important because, you know, I discovered through these portraits that I have many images that were printed in my mind and that I need to recreate. I always say that this portrait of Aminata is also a recreation of my mom's portrait, because my mom is also Aminata. My mom, phenomenal woman. I know everybody says this about their mom, but I think she was as busy as Aminata is. On top of it, she had like probably, I think she had four children by the time she finished her studies, 3 girls and 1 boy. And this is just to show also the role of young women in our modern society. You know, the image of the submitted, inexistent young African woman who barely says a word and who stays home cooking all day and suffering from a husband. It does exist, but it's not only that. I mean, we also have incredible mothers, incredible professional mothers who give the best to their children. And how come it's never represented? How come it's never talked about? So in each of these portraits, there are many layers of representation and many statements that are, I would not say hidden, but they are part of the image. The use of textiles mean a lot to us. They tell stories about families, they tell stories about important moments. When it's hand-woven fabrics, some people among my generation and the previous generations know exactly what this was hand-woven for. When my mom was pregnant, a piece of cloth was made when I was born. A couple more were made. And I know when I die, there will be a piece of cloth that will accompany me. So all these are very important elements that I add to the creation of every portrait to tell the story not of just one person, but the story of a people, of a generation. And sometimes it's very selfish. I don't even feel the need to explain, because as long as it means something to me and it means something to the seer, well, it's already good enough. Joël, for instance, one of my oldest friends, half Senegalese, half Italian, currently living in London, singer, composer, musician. Khadi Nyan, who's my makeup artist, she studied in the United States, and as soon as she graduated, just like me, she felt the need to go back home and make it happen and be the best makeup artist possible. She worked on movies which were nominated for one particular movie. I don't know if you guys watched it, Timbuktu by Abderrahmane Sissoko, which was nominated for an Oscar.
Wow.
She did the makeup from Dakar. And I think it's extremely important to acknowledge all these things that are happening in the continent. I know that there's a need to document all the atrocities and all the things that are not doing right, but if we all do that, then we're taking the rest of the continent for granted. And many sartorial statements, she came up with this whole look. I didn't do the styling for this particular portrait. She came up with this 11 meters skirt, this Victorian look, and this afro hair. And so many statements are hidden in each of these portraits. This is a young blogger from Dakar, Mondaine, who's doing an incredible job in documenting the underground scene. All these rappers, all these artists you will never see in a national gallery, you will never see them on national TV. Somebody needs to talk about them. Well, this 20-year-old boy does it like nobody else. Seli Habikan, fashion designer, Mamadou, another blogger. My collection of hand-woven fabrics, this is from Niger, and it's a very rare indigo print. You barely can find natural indigo anywhere in the world anymore. So this is also something very important. I need to incorporate this and put it into a modern, edgy depiction of what it is to be a young African professional. Mam Daragnan, who's a photographer, Senegalese and French, who does this incredible work on documenting the African urban landscapes. Her work is incredible, also a very good friend of mine, and I keep on shooting, and I have like 120 portraits. And then one day I'm given the opportunity to work with another photographer named Antoine Tempé, who was born French and who lived most of his life in the US, in New York precisely. And we decide to celebrate the things that we have in common, the most important being the love of a good movie. You know, think about it when you look at a good movie. We all have a favorite movie. We all have a favorite scene in a Hollywood movie. We all have a character that we identify with, despite of the age difference or the race. I mean, when you look at a James Bond movie, you forget that he's white. He's just James Bond. When I was a kid watching a Bruce Lee movie, it was Bruce Lee. I didn't care if he was Chinese or Asian or American. So we decided to celebrate this, and the question we asked ourselves was, what if our favorite movie was staged in Africa? What would it look like? So it was really a celebration, no racial agenda whatsoever, no fight against Hollywood or anything. So I recreate one of my favorite scenes, which is this is a poster for American Beauty, where you have this gorgeous teenage blonde girl laying on a bed of roses. And I decided to shoot this in Abidjan, and I replaced her with one of the most prominent Ivorian models, and she's laying in a bed of green plants. We do the matrix in Dakar with a little twist. It's a girl, Frida, from the Frida biopic. What else did we shoot? Basic Instinct. Chicago, and it goes on and on. It's a series of 20. And I have this article on CNN. I'm talking about my previous work, like the artist portraits, and you know, And at the end of the conversation, the journalist asked me about one of the images he had seen. What's this series about? And briefly, I talk about Hollywood. I mean, this series. And the day after, I'm very surprised to see that the title of the article has completely changed. It's not about my artist portraits anymore. And the title is Two Senegalese Black Artists Reinvent Hollywood in Black. So, of course, I say, okay, he needs to sell his article, then it's fine. But then I know one should never read the comments under an article. But I read it, and it was a race war. So basically, I, because the other photographer was completely pushed away, I was accused of being some racist black artist who's taking a revenge on a too white Hollywood. And of course, this is a crime. How can one imagine a black Audrey Hepburn? Are you kidding me? So this was a defining moment. That's where I realized that one couldn't erase, how would I put it? Is it correct to say one cannot make an abstraction of their race? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Because I'm thinking in French.
You can't remove yourself.
Yeah, you can't remove yourself from this conversation. So I might as well soak into it, but in a positive way that brings something to the conversation. So I keep this very important decision in the back of my mind until I'm given an opportunity to go to a residency in Spain, in the south of Spain, Malaga, which has been the traditional point of contact between the Arab world, the African world, and the European civilization. And I decided that I would sort of build my visual culture because, as you know, I come from finance. Even though I read a lot of books and everything, but I don't have the names on top of the visual references I have, and I decided to do a big research on art history. I'm fascinated by the Baroque painters like Velázquez and classical painters of among the masters of European painting, Matisse, Toulouse-Lautrec, the way they treat their image treatment. How do they manage to paint the reflection of light on every skin? And I'm obviously drawn into looking for examples on black skins because that's what I do most of the time, and I really want to see how a Velázquez would paint a black skin, and I come across a few examples like this portrait of Anne-Louis Giraudet, French painter, of some black guy. At this moment, it's just some black guy. I don't know who it is. Oops, I'm sorry. And then I discovered that Jean-Baptiste Bellay was actually born in Dakar. He was a Senegalese slave who was taken to the West Indies and who bought his own freedom. And he's actually one of the fathers of the French Republic and of our modern definition of what a democracy, what a republic is. But how come it took me 34 years to hear about this gentleman who was born 3 minutes away from where I was born? Nobody taught me who he was in school, and I'm pretty sure that in France, people of my generation have no idea who he is. He is, even though his portrait is part of the collection of the National Museum of Versailles. Something is not right. This should be celebrated. This is a beautiful story of a slave who fought for freedom for a people who enslaved him. And nobody talks about it. And I see that there are many more examples. And there are stories that people never talk about. African kings and queens used to send diplomats to European kingdoms. This is Prince Don Nicolau from the Empire of Congo who was sent to Portugal when he was 15 years old to protest against the Queen of Portugal, against the military expansion of what became later Angola. Nobody talks about it. I never heard about him. In every European kingdom, there has been at least one prominent, very influential African who was respected and feared. The court of Sweden and Prussia. Angelo Soliman, Mozart's best friend, mathematician, philosopher, writer, who had a very terrible fate because after he died, he was, what's the word, stuffed? Empaillé? Mm-hmm. Stuffed and showed in a museum until like less than 100 years ago. And the label was the civilized Negro. Nobody knows about him. He was born in Nigeria and given as a gift to some European who happened to be there. And despite all these very dark beginnings, he was one of the most respected court member of his generation. Some beautiful stories. Ayuba Suleiman Jallo. This portrait is very, it's very famous. It's part of the National Portrait Gallery of the United Kingdom because there has been a war between some foreign collector who bought it from the National Portrait Gallery, and basically there was like a battle to make sure that this would stay in the United Kingdom. So we care about the painting, but we care very little about who this person was. This person was a Muslim scholar abducted from Senegal and taken as a slave. And the story of his liberation is the story of a friendship between an English lord and a Muslim scholar. He was freed and sent back to Senegal. When he was sent back to Senegal a few years after, his wife had been given to somebody else, and he had the most tragic return to the motherland. I feel the need to invest more than just a camera, just a portrait. I need to give something else. So I decide to invest my appearance, my body, and to sort of offer my body to the memory of these great human beings who are not celebrated enough, who are never talked about. And it's a way for me to contribute to this conversation. What is the role of the African in history? What if we try to find in history things that bring us together rather than tearing us apart? What about mutual acceptance? What about, I mean, how can we pretend that we thinking about a future together if we don't acknowledge each other's past? This is not going to work. This is extremely important because this world nowadays is such global village. If you're a black French citizen born in 1980 in Paris and you've never been to Africa, how do you identify with your nationality if you see no examples of people before you who have brought something to this French civilization? It's not going to work. And when you're a young African born in Dakar like I am, and you have the feeling that your people have never brought anything to this human experience, it's not going to work either. I find that there are similarities between the fate of these figures and the fate of the current soccer royalty. When you look at the soccer superstars from Africa and you look at their fate, it's a mix of glory and rejection, respect and racism. You can be Samuel Eto'o or DJ Drogba and be a billionaire, But every now and then, you will have a hard time in a stadium because somebody will find it funny to throw a banana at you, or scream like a monkey when you score a goal or when you don't. This just shows that there is a lot to do in terms of mutual acceptation, mutual recognition. And this project is sort of my contribution to this conversation. And I must say, after the Remixing Hollywood experience, I was terrified the day I decided to put this series out. And I had my fist up and I was ready to fight. And thankfully, I never had to fight because it worked. People really saw beyond the simple fact of an African dressed like a musketeer. People really, I have the feeling, I might be wrong, but I like to believe that people made the effort of seeing the purpose behind this project. And I'm very, very happy that I get more and more opportunities to go around the world to talk about who these characters are. And I'm glad to see that not only my people identify with these characters, and everybody feels the need to rewrite a common history, a human history that is made of tragic stories, that is made of sacrifices, injustice, but also beautiful stories and beautiful positive experiences. I think there are many things that we can overcome as human beings if we take inspiration from what these characters have gone through. Even in Latin America, Enrique Diaz, imagine he was the first black soldier of Brazil. In the Catholic Church, Saint Benedict the Moor, born in Ethiopia, born from Ethiopian slaves living in Italy, and who was canonized. Did you say that in English?
Yeah.
Canonized in the Catholic Church. Many people know the saint, but very few people know that he was actually black. Even in Asia, in India, you had prime ministers and soldiers of black heritage. Juan de Pareja, who was Diego Velázquez's assistant, and also himself a great painter. This painting is from Diego Velázquez. And of course, Frederick Douglass, who is probably the most photographed human being of his time. So inspiring not only to African Americans, but to Americans and the world for his activism, for his to all the things he's brought to what it is to be a citizen, what it is to fight injustice and bring something positive that stays on the table. So this is where I am right now, and looking forward, I definitely want to be considered as a member of this society of artists who think about what we call in French le vivre ensemble, which is the living together. It involves being uncomfortable. It involves having the tough conversations. It involves saying things that you feel that aren't right, but we don't have to hate each other to have this conversation. I know I sound candid, but I'd like to believe in this, and that this is one of the driving motivations. This is why I decided to become an artist, and the day I feel that I can't do that anymore, then maybe I might go back to finance. Or But anyway, thanks again. I know I talk a lot, and sometimes that don't make sense, but I'm very happy I had this moment with you. And if you have any question or contribution, please feel free.